This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest. This gentleman is a legend, and he's played with everyone that you can think of. Artists like Miles Davis, Art Blakey, Nancy Wilson, Herbie Hancock, Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt, Sarah Vaughan. I can go on and on and on. And it is an honor to have him on the show today. He's been on this team for over 60 years. Please welcome Mr. Buster Williams. How are you, sir?
Okay, how you doing, Preston?
Good, good, man. You're looking good. I see your bases back there. Um,
Yeah,
but
I got to get me a shoji screen so I can hide them.
okay,
Oh,
well, listen, man.
you know how people use the background. Can you
Uh-huh.
get a? This is on what's this? Go to meeting.
Yeah, it's like the same as Zoom. I find it even better than Zoom. The picture is a little better, and I've been using both, but I find this works better. But
Mm.
Lenny was on the show Saturday. We had a good time, and we chatted, and I was looking forward to talking to you. And wanted to start back from your humble beginnings, Buster. I understand that you are from, I believe, what, Camden, New Jersey? Is that correct?
Camden, New Jersey. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And tell us a little bit about your upbringing, man. I understand that you started music early. You were influenced by your dad. I guess he was a musician and had
Yeah,
rehearsed.
my dad played bass, piano, and drums,
Wow.
and music was being played in the house all day, every day.
Mm, mm.
He had an extensive um, record collection, and in those days, the records were 78s,
Yes. Okay. Okay.
and they were thick, man. And you better not drop a record on the floor; it would shatter.
Yeah.
These three and the thirds, they don't. I mean, of course, that's ancient also now, but they
Hmm.
got they became plastic and or whatever it was, and
Hmm.
more flexible. You could bend the record like that, but these 78s, they had no flexibility at all.
Mm.
So, but my father had an extensive collection. So he had all of the big bands and all of the meaningful uh, quartets and quintets.
Hmm.
So I heard all of this stuff all the time.
Mm. Mm.
And my father was my hero, and I wanted to do what he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So um,
I heard that.
I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
I had a stint with drums and piano
Interesting.
and bass, but I settled on the bass.
Now I heard that he had a record that influenced you with the bassist Oscar Pettiford, and that was very influential in getting you maybe to start playing bass.
Yeah, he played a record for me one day. Oscar Pettiford played Stardust.
Stardust. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
solo.
Interesting.
And I've told this story many times, and um, it's very ironic because um, there was no video in those days, so your ears were keen. You could
Mm.
hear everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what I heard was not just the brilliance of his notes
Right.
and his ability to get over the instrument, but um, I could hear his thumb as it as he uh, worked up and down the fingerboard, and
Mm.
his thumb would squeak. The way he was mic'd,
Mm-hmm.
I could hear the squeak. His thumb would squeak as he it would slide up and down the fingerboard.
Mm.
And I don't know, there was just something about that squeak that was just so intimate to me.
Yeah.
It became so personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I had um, watched my father play the bass. He liked to sit on the sofa
Mm-hmm.
and put the bass between his legs as though it were a cello.
Wow.
And he bowed. His one of his favorites was uh, what's his name? Uh, I forget his name, but anyway,
Was it
and
bass player?
yeah,
You talking about
uh,
Slam Stewart?
Slam Stewart,
Yeah.
Slam Stewart, and uh, uh, and he would bow. Um, Slam Stewart was his man. Slam Stewart had this style of singing
Mm.
or zooming, humming with the along with his orchestra work.
Yeah.
And so I watched my father play the bass, and was always in awe of the way he played.
Wow.
But when I heard this finger, this thumb sliding up the back of the neck
Hmm.
of the fingerboard of the bass, that just did it for me.
Wow. So you
And so
actually,
that's when I had to beg my father, Dad, please teach me how to play the bass.
wow. So you actually picked it up when you were in your early teens?
Oh, I was about uh, 12, 13 years old.
13. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I tell
Yeah.
you, your dad sounds like an amazing musician. He was, having that type of influence on you. And then from there, I guess you started playing, but you seem like you started playing professionally at a very young age. Well, you were probably only in your teens when you had your first professional job, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My father, um, as I progressed, he introduced me to, uh, his friends. And
Hmm.
as I said, not only was the music in the house on the records and this roller piano that we had,
Yeah.
you'd sit at the piano and play the pedals, and and the piano would play for you.
Mm.
But he would have jam sessions at the house, so his
Wow.
musician friends would be there,
Hmm.
and I'd always be there, sitting with my mouth hanging. I was in awe at what these guys would do.
Mm.
And so when my father considered I was ready to step out of the house and play a gig, well, there were gigs waiting.
Mm.
These were friends of my father's, and they say my father. I remember my father sent me on a gig with this friend named Louis Judge,
Hmm.
and Louis Judge was a beautiful tenor player, and so Louis said, "Well, Charlie," they called my father Charlie.
Hmm.
Charles Williams
Okay.
was his name. I'm Charles Williams Jr., Charles Anthony Williams Sr., and I'm Charles Anthony Williams Jr.
Okay.
And they said, "Well, Charlie, is Buster ready?" And uh, my father would say, "You damn right he's ready. I'm his teacher, ain't I?" So he said, "Okay." So then he would send me on gigs, and then they'd report back to him,
Mm.
and the reports were always favorable. Charlie, my goodness, your boy's playing his butt off. And
Wow.
my father said, "Of course he is." So that's how it all started.
Man, that's incredible. Now how did you get hooked up with Sonny Stitt and Gene Ammons?
Well, the same kind of way. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of Nelson Boyd.
Name sounds familiar. I think I have heard of it. I think.
Nelson Boyd used to play with Charlie Parker,
Mm.
and Charlie Parker wrote a tune called Half Nelson,
Half Nelson. That I'm familiar
and
with.
it was dedicated to Nelson Boyd. Nelson Boyd also was a long-standing bass player with Dizzy Gillespie,
Okay.
and Nelson Boyd was a friend of my father's,
Interesting.
and he lived in North Camden,
Hmm.
and we lived in South Camden.
Okay.
And Nelson Boyd used to come by the house, and hang out with my father. They'd be laughing and talking. And on this one particular evening, uh, uh, Nelson called my father. It was a Friday night, and he was playing over at the Showboat in
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia with Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some kind of emergency or something, and he couldn't play the weekend. So he called my father to sub for him. My
Mm-hmm.
father was already working. He already had a gig. So he says, okay, well, look, I'll send Buster. So Nelson said, okay, Charlie, if you think he's cool. So my father said, you're damn right he's cool. So now I was over at my girlfriend's house. Her name was Brenda.
Okay.
And I'm getting ready to take Brenda to the movies. It's a Friday evening, and it's springtime or summer. I think it was summer. And so my father calls over to Brenda's house, and Brenda's mother picks up the phone and she says, Buster, your father's on the phone. And so I go pick up the phone, and my dad says, come home and put on your suit. You got a gig.
Oh.
And I said, well, Dad, I'm getting ready to go to the movie. He said, I said you got a gig. And he hung up the phone. Now, my father was not a man to be messed with.
Okay.
You didn't question him. And there was no delay when he said jump. When he said jump, your question was how high.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember very clearly, Brenda's upstairs getting dressed. I hung up the phone, and uh, I'm walking out the front door, and I said, Brenda, I gotta go. I got a gig. And I remember the last words that I ever heard Brenda say, and she says, you got a what? And I shut the door. I never saw Brenda again. And
Wow.
I went home and I put on my gig suit. The gig suit was a blue gabardine suit,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a white shirt, and you had a black tie. That was the gig outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And this black tie, since it was the gig outfit, I never untied it. I just slid it, slid it down the knot to get it over my head.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, this knot would become, filled with perspiration and grease. And eventually, there would come one time where you would try and knot up the tie, and the tie would just split.
Oh my
You
God.
know, But anyway, my tie was still working.
Okay.
Okay. So I put on my gig suit and my stingy brim tie, and I went over to the Showboat with my bass. And of course, I'm there before anybody. There's nobody there but the bartender who's
Mm-hmm.
washing up, getting his bar ready for service. And the bandstand was inside the bar. The bar was an oval that went around the bandstand.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little door you go in, and you walk up these, 3 steps, and there's the bandstand.
Mm-hmm.
So I set up my stuff, and I'm nervous. I'm excited. My goodness, I'm going to play with Sonny Stitt
Wow.
and Gene Ammons. And I've had dreams about these guys, you know.
Wow.
Gene Ammons had just had this hit record, Canadian Sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Sonny Stitt was the talk of the town. And, they were both just amazing.
Mm.
And so I set my stuff up. And then I sit at the bottom of these stairs that are going upstairs because there's a hotel upstairs, you know, and Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt are staying in the hotel upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting down at the a chair at the bottom of the stairs. I want to be visible when they're coming down. I want to see them coming down the stairs.
Right.
Eventually, I see these beautiful, tan shoes, starting to descend the stairs. Then I see, these gold pant legs, and this, and then I see, a shiny alto saxophone in one hand, and I see a tenor saxophone in the other. And eventually I see the face, and it's Sonny Stitt.
Mm.
And he looks like an emerging giant. I jumped up at attention. And as Sonny approached me, he said, "Look, who the hell are you?" I said, "Mr. Stitt, my name is Charles Williams. And I'm here to play bass for you. Nelson Boyd sent me." And he looked at me and he frowned. He looked up and down. He says, "Yeah, can you play?" I said, "I'm going to do my best, sir." He said, "You're going to make the gig?" I said, "I'm going to do my best." He said, "You're going to do your best? Are you going to make the gig?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, then let's hear it."
Oh man.
We got on the bandstand, and eventually, John Houston, the piano player, he comes in. Dude Brown, the drummer. Gene Ammons comes down. We get on the bandstand and we play. And man, it was the most exhilarating experience that
Wow.
I had ever had up to that time. When we finished the set, and we come out of the Oval, which is the bar, Sonny Stitt and Gene Ammons, they both grab me and they take me up these stairs.
Mm.
And they sit me down on the sofa in the lobby of this hotel. And they said, "Who are you?" And I told them again, Charles Williams. I didn't know I could be Buster Williams. Buster was my nickname. This is
Uh,
formal.
right.
This is formal. So, So they said, "Well, you playing your ass off." I said, "Thank you, sir." He says, Gene Ammons says, "Look, you want to stay with the band?" And I look at Sonny Stitt, and he's smiling with a frown and a smile on his face. And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." So they said, "Okay, well, this is Friday. We finishing the gig on Saturday." They said, "Tomorrow night, we're leaving right after the gig. We're going to Chicago."
Mm.
So the next night, I come with my suitcase, and after the gig, we got in the cars. Gene Ammons had a Chrysler Imperial,
Mm.
long, beautiful Chrysler Imperial. Sonny Stitt had a fish-tailed white Cadillac. And so I get in the car with Gene Ammons. Gene Ammons had a driver. And so Dude Brown, John Houston, we all get in these two cars, and we're going to Chicago.
Mm.
And I've been on the road ever since.
Buster, what is this story that I hear that you guys, I guess you had been playing with them for a while, and you guys get stranded in Kansas City, and Gene Ammons didn't pay you and ran off. Is that true? He took the money and ran
Yeah,
off?
it's very true.
Wow.
We were in Kansas City for a 2-week gig. Sonny Stitt wasn't on this gig with it. It was just the quartet.
Mm-hmm.
And um, at the end of the first week, uh, Gene Ammons gives us a story that uh, we're going to get paid everything on the second week.
Mm-hmm.
So Saturday night of the second week comes, and we have a meeting in Gene Ammons' room. We called him Jug, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We never called him Gene. It was always Jug. And he gives us this story about uh, uh, the club owner came up short with the money. And our next gig, this is in Kansas City,
Mm-hmm.
and our next gig is in Chicago. Now, we had a lot of stuff in Chicago because Gene Ammons lived in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
We played the Sutherland Hotel, which played McKee's, and we're supposed to be going into McKee's, and we're going to be there for 16 weeks.
Mm.
And so Jug says, "Look, I'll go on to Chicago and get a draw and send all of you your money, me, John, and Dude." And we open up Tuesday night. So we said, fine. So Jug goes on to Chicago, and so this is Sunday's the next day,
Mm-hmm.
Monday's the next day. And so we got to be leaving on either Monday or Tuesday. We open up Tuesday night. So we got no phone call and no Western Union. In other words, no money.
Oh boy.
And the hotel owner is pressing us to pay our hotel bill. Plus, it turns out that Judge had left without paying his hotel bill.
Oh boy.
And so we're stuck with that. And anyway, we call the club. We call McKee's. And of course, now it's Tuesday. So, he wasn't answering the phone at home. So we called the club at, the time that we're supposed to hit. And sure enough, someone picks up the phone and we hear Jug playing in the background. He's
Mm.
on the stage with a local rhythm section and Benny Green on trombone, the famous Benny Green. And so they say, no, Jug can't come to the phone because he's performing right now.
Oh my
So of
God.
course, now we know we're stranded. So fortunately, the club that we had just finished was starting. They opened up the next night on Wednesday, and Al Hibbler was coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just bringing a piano player, um, uh, piano player who was really famous in Washington D.C. What was his name? Um, you're from D.C., right?
I'm from the Baltimore, DC area.
Yeah. Well, what was his name? Um,
And where was he from?
from D.C. Played with Shirley Horn, and all of the great singers loved him.
Oh man, I got
Um,
I have a mental block too. I can't think of who that could be.
anyway, his name will come to me. But
Okay.
anyway, so the club owner said, so look, Buster, you can play bass. Dude, you can play drums. And John, you can play solo piano on intermission.
Hmm.
So now this is the club owner giving us a way to survive and a way to make some money and get on. So we said, oh, that's great. So now we want to go to the union and put in a claim against, Gene Ammons so that
Mm-hmm.
we can eventually get our money. So we go to the union and tell the representative what's happening. And he tells us, well, no, you guys can't work there. He said, because we got our own local musicians who need gigs. So we say, yeah, but this is an emergency. We got no way to get home. So he said, that's not my problem.
Mm.
So we go back to the club and explain this to the club owner.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out, that the club owner and his brother, they owned the club and they were mafia.
Oh, wow.
So he says, okay, don't worry about it. He picks up the phone, he calls the union, and he says a few words and hangs up the phone. He said, let's sit down and wait a minute. He goes and gets us, a Coca-Cola. And in about 10 minutes, this representative that told us, that we couldn't work and was very indifferent to our problem, comes in with this hat in his hand, talking about, oh, I'm so happy, that that you guys can work here, and solve this problem. Any help that I can offer, please don't hesitate to call.
Hmm. Wow. That's like a blessing in disguise.
Listen, man, it was the mafia. The mafia straightened this shit right out. You know?
Let me ask you, Buster. Did you guys ever catch up with what's his name, Gene Ammons, and say, "Hey, man, where's my money?"
Listen, I was the only one that really put in a claim and sued Gene Ammons. Now, there's an album. Gene Ammons um, uh, got arrested uh, the week after that, or 2 weeks after that,
Hmm.
and spent some time in prison.
Wow.
And there's an album that came out a few years later, and the cover of the album is Gene Ammons at the top of the stairs,
Mm-hmm.
with as you descend, getting ready to descend an airplane,
Okay.
and it says "The Boss is Back." You ever seen that album?
I probably have. I probably have. I'm sure.
That album is the first album that Gene Ammons made after coming out of prison,
Mm.
and I'm on it.
You're on. Oh, wow.
Because the first thing he did when he came out of prison was he called me. Gene Ammons and Sonny Stick called me Junior. And he called me and said, hey, Junior. He said, I'm home. He said, come on, make a record with me. I'm coming to New York. So I'm on that record. We
Man, you
never
must.
said a thing about
Okay.
what happened in Kansas City.
Wow. That's amazing. And you also worked with Jimmy Heath too early in your career too, didn't you?
I worked with Jimmy Heath before Gene Ammons and Sonny Stick, because Jimmy Heath, that was right there in Philadelphia. So
Mm.
that was um, my entrance, as I call it, into the big time.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, because when I started with working with Jimmy Heath, I said, I got it made now. This is big time.
Right.
And Jimmy had recently come out of prison. He
Mm.
had been incarcerated for a while, and he came out, and they sort of like handed him the keys to the city.
Mm.
And he had in the band um, piano player who was one of my favorite piano players and who was a mentor of mine in Camden, New Jersey. His name was Sam Dockery.
Mm. Sam Doc.
And and shortly after I joined Jimmy Heath, this great drummer named Specs Wright, who had also been incarcerated, comes out of prison and he
Mhm.
joins the band.
Okay.
Specs Wright was an incredible drummer. So the band was Specs Wright, Sam Dockery, myself, and Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy Heath. Okay.
And we were the number one band in Philly. Worked
Mm.
all the time.
Wow, amazing. Now, Buster, in the early 60s, you hooked up and you were performing. You've accompanied a lot of singers like Sarah Vaughan, Betty Carter, so many of them. What's the other one's name? Trying to think of her name that you played with, but you started touring with Sarah Vaughan. What was it like working with her, and how did you get that gig?
Well, um, first I was with we had a trio, um, piano player and a drummer from Wilmington, New Jersey,
Okay.
and we used to play around Wilmington and Philadelphia, and we were playing somewhere in Dakota Staten. Do you remember Dakota Staten?
No, I do not.
Okay, Dakota Staten had a big hit called "The Late Late Show,"
Okay.
and her manager husband was a trumpet player that used to play with Dizzy Gillespie named Haji Daoud, something
Mm,
like that. And uh, he heard the trio and hired the trio, Gerald Price on piano, Billy Davis on drums, and myself to be uh, the trio for Dakota Staten.
okay.
And so we started working with Dakota Staten, and I did that gig for about a year and a half.
Year and a half. Wow.
Yeah, and then uh, I forget exactly how it all came about, but I started working with Betty Carter.
Oh, wow. She's great.
Now, and it's all while this is happening, I'm working in Philly,
Hmm.
with people like Benny Golson
Hmm.
and Lee Morgan
Oh, Lee Morgan. Wow.
and Bobby Timmons,
Hmm.
and so Philly was my stomping grounds.
Right.
And I started working with Betty Carter,
Betty Carter.
and we were working at Birdland, the
Hmm.
original Birdland in
Hmm.
New York, on 52nd and Broadway, or 52nd and 7th Avenue, whatever it was. And Sarah Vaughan, we come off the bandstand, and this piano player named Kirk Stewart comes up to me
Hmm.
and says that he's he plays with Sarah Vaughan. And Sarah Vaughan, he says, Sarah Vaughan would love to have you in her band.
Mm.
And so uh, when that gig at the Blue Note finished, I told Betty Carter, that um, that would be my last gig with her because I'm going to join Sarah Vaughan.
Right.
And of course, Betty Carter was pissed. Oh, she was pissed. She had always been so sweet to me,
Yeah.
but on this pay night, of course I got paid, but she was pissed. Anyway, and I went from Betty Carter and I started working with Sarah Vaughan.
Wow.
And that bass that you see behind me,
Hmm.
that big bass,
Yeah.
I was working with Sarah Vaughan. We made our first trip to Europe. That was my first trip to Europe, and we played Tivoli Gardens
Hmm.
for a month in Copenhagen,
Wow.
and then we went from there to London to play a month um, with Count Basie,
Wow. That's amazing. Count
and
Basie.
touring through. We played all of these different cities in
Right.
London.
Right.
And the day that I got there, I went deliberately to this place called Piccadilly Circus in
Hmm.
London because I knew there was two bass shops there, and I wanted to see about getting that bass.
Mm.
That bass is called a Hawks Panormo, and I wanted a Hawks Panormo. Um, uh, uh, what's his name? Buddy Collette was the bass player with uh, Count Basie, and we
Mm-hmm.
were friends, and we knew that we were going to be going to Europe and touring together.
Mm-hmm.
And we both wanted a Hawks Panormo,
Wow.
and we made a decision. We're going to go down to Piccadilly Circus, and there's a Boozy and Hawks bass shop. Across the street is uh, uh, Charles Foot Limited,
Okay.
another bass shop. I happened to get there the day before Count Basie's band arrived, and I got that. I went down to Piccadilly Circus, and I found this bass in Charles Foot Limited,
Mm.
and um, I got there 10 o'clock in the morning. We had just arrived. We stayed at the Mayfair Hotel,
Mm-hmm.
and so we went. I arrived, of course, with Saravine, our trio, and we checked into the Mayfair Hotel. I went straight down to Piccadilly Circus, found this bass. I played it from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah,
You
and
you actually stayed in the store that long playing it?
oh yeah, right
Wow.
there in the bass shop, and this was the bass. I knew it was my dream bass,
Mm.
and I decided to leave at 4 o'clock because um, I had to get back because we had a sound check or something, a rehearsal or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back. So as I'm getting ready to leave, the guy, the owner of the shop, he says, "Look," he says, "I know you love this bass. You've been with it all day long." He said, "But I must tell you that before you came in, someone called and asked me if I had this bass, a Hawks Panormo, and if I did, to hold it for them, and they would be in to pick it up and pay for it
Mm.
before I close."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Now I'm closing in an hour. I'm closing at 5 o'clock. If this person doesn't come, then if you want to come back and buy this bass, then it's yours." So I said, "Wow, great." So I went back to the Mayfair Hotel. I went to Sarah's room and I said, "Sarah," I said, "I found the bass of my dreams." And she says, "Okay, how much is it?" And I said, "Well, the guy has agreed that um, the bass that I have, I can trade it in on this bass. He'll give me, I had told him about this bass that I had, and I had paid $100 for this bass. And this bass was $450.
Mm.
And he would give me $100 on my trade-in, and it would cost me $350 to get this bass. So Sarah gave me $350.
Man, that's wonderful.
I went back to Piccadilly Circus and with my bass, and I gave the guy the bass that I had. He gave me this bass, a brand new cover,
Wow.
and now I don't know if it's amazing to you, but this is what we could get instruments for in those days. It's totally impossible
Yeah.
now.
Right. Right.
You can't buy a piece of wood, you know, for that bass, for any bass, for $350.
That bass that you got, what would it be worth now if you bought it? Like what, 5, 10 grand?
listen, man, it's high, almost six figures.
Man.
Yeah,
Wow, that's incredible. That is
yeah.
incredible. Wow.
Mhm.
Man, that's good. Sarah was nice to lend you that money. That you got that base, so good for you. Hey, what was it
You
like?
know,
I'm sorry.
I don't know if Sarah. I can't say, with certainty that Sarah ever took that money out of my pay.
Wow. Obviously, she really liked you, man. Um, that's just great. I mean, for her to do that, because some musicians, it was funny. I was talking to bassist John Patitucci the other week, and it was a bass that he wanted to get, and Chick, he was playing with Chick Corea at the time, and Chick told him, he says, we'll just take it out of your money each time you get paid. But that's
Right.
wonderful. But what was it like playing with Mary Lou Williams?
Oh, Mary Lou. Oh man, she was beautiful. We would tour, and people used to think that I was her son.
Really?
Well, she's Mary Lou Williams. I'm Buster Williams. You know, and she sure treated me, with maternal affection.
Hmm.
She was beautiful. Bob Crenshaw
Yeah.
uh, was instrumental with me getting that gig with her.
Oh wow. Yeah, the late
When I
Bob Crenshaw.
I
Yeah.
had been in I had been with Sarah with Nancy Wilson. I
Mm-hmm.
joined Nancy Wilson in '65.
65. Okay.
Yeah, and me and my wife we married in '65. Nancy was the um, maid of honor for my wife at our wedding,
Mm. Oh, that's wonderful.
and
Wow.
she as a wedding gift, she sponsored our movement from New York to Los Angeles
Mm.
because she was living in Chicago, and we were playing all of the jazz clubs, but she was moving into more Coconut Grove, Fairmount Hotel, Sahara, you know, uh,
Mhm.
hotel in Las Vegas. She was moving into more this kind of elitist kind of uh, environment. You know, uh,
Mhm.
she was taking her. She was becoming more of more than just the jazz singer with the band.
Right. Right.
So she wanted her operation to work out of Los Angeles.
Mhm. Okay.
So she took it upon herself to move us to Los Angeles.
Interesting.
And so we stayed in Los Angeles from '64 of April until '68 of uh, October.
Wow. Like 4.5 years.
Yeah. And so I came back to New York, and uh, there was a bass player named Larry Ridley.
Oh, I know Dr. Larry Ridley. Yeah.
Larry Ridley and another bass player named Khan, and a drummer named Mickey Roker.
Mickey Roker. Yep.
Mickey Roker and I were good friends,
Yeah.
and Bob Crenshaw.
Mhm.
And these four guys really befriended me, man, and they made my intro into New York really pleasant. And they looked out for me. Bob was getting very busy with Sesame Street, and he was working at the Hickory House with him and Mickey Roker were working at the Hickory House with
Mhm.
Mary Lou Williams.
Mary Lou.
And so they took me to the Hickory House one night. They wanted me to meet Mary Lou. And uh, Bob got Mary Lou to let me play a set with her,
Mm-hmm.
and she liked me. And Bob said, "Look, man," he says, "I want you to take this gig."
Oh, wow.
And Mary wants you on this gig, and I want you to take this gig. So Bob gave me the gig.
Mm.
So I worked, for years with Mary Lou
Mm.
and Mickey Roker,
Wow. That's
and
great.
we traveled all over the country, and we did the first jazz mass at the uh, 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 Fifth Avenue Cathedral
Mm.
with the Mary Lou, and it got a 2-page write up in the New York Times.
Mm. Wow. That's
And
something.
yeah, so my stay with Mary Lou was I was with her until the time that she couldn't play anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think she passed away like in 81 or something like that. Yeah. She was fantastic.
Yeah,
Wow.
she had just taken the job at Duke University down in uh, North Carolina.
Mm. Wow. Now, Buster, I was going to ask you, what bass players were you influenced by during that time? I mean, were you listening to people like Mingus or Paul Chambers, or who were the guys that really influenced you, especially when you were really getting it together?
Well, first of all, I listened to everybody.
Okay.
Paul Chambers, I could not get him out of my head. I
Really?
loved everything that he did, and Paul Chambers was the most lyrical, musical uh, bass player that
Mm.
I ever heard.
Wow.
And I wanted to play just like Paul Chambers. So I copied so much stuff that he did.
Right.
And then there was, of course, Ray Brown.
Yeah. Ray Brown. Hmm.
Ray Brown was, oh my goodness, he was a master. But there was a bass player in Philadelphia named Arthur Harper.
Mm.
I loved Arthur Harper. He had what I call the hump. You know, he had
Hmm.
such a great feeling when he walked.
Right.
Bob
Right.
Crenshaw
Yeah.
was he his actions were so precise, you know.
Yeah.
And then um, uh, there were so many people. Percy Heath.
Percy Heath.
Percy Heath never played a wrong note, you know.
Mm.
So I listened to all of these, and there was another bass player in Philly named Spanky DeBrest.
Mm.
He was in the early um, Art Blakey messages when Art Blakey had my piano player mentor, Sam Dockery, and um, Jackie McLean,
Hmm.
and Sam Spanky DeBrest. And uh, Spanky was another, you know, Jimmy Garrison,
Jimmy Garrison's great. Yeah.
you know, and then of course Oscar Pettiford, and Mingus was never a real influence on me.
Really? Was it
No,
his music, his bass playing? It never really, got your attention, or was he just too far out for you? Or
he wasn't far out at all.
okay,
No, he just wasn't an influence on me.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
You
Interesting.
know, um, but I knew that I had to listen to everybody,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I did, so I listened, and learned what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do,
Mm, mm,
you know.
interesting.
So
Yeah. Now, Buster, how did you get to work with Miles Davis? Because right around that time in the mid 60s, I know he had Ron Carter. When you worked with him, was Ron just doing something on his own, or had he already left the band? Or how'd you get to play with Miles during that time period?
Well, when I was with Sarah Vaughan, um, like I said, my first trip to Europe was with Sarah Vaughan,
Yeah.
and the first gig we played was a week on the French Riviera,
Mm-hmm.
a place called Jean Le Pont,
Okay.
and Miles was on this festival with us, and we were all staying at the same hotel. And the band was Miles, Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, George Coleman,
This is before Wayne Shorter.
yeah, and Ron Carter.
Okay.
And we would all hang out. I met these guys hanging around the pool,
Okay.
and I became, good friends with them. And we would, now this is the French Riviera. It's summertime. It's beautiful, and after the gig, there was always somewhere to play jam sessions and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I would go and play with, we'd play jam sessions. I would play with Herbie, and even Tony played some jam sessions.
Wow. The great Tony Williams. What a drummer.
And and we just hang out, man. We just had lots of fun.
Mm.
So this was in 65. In 67, I had moved to, Los Angeles in 65 with Nancy Wilson.
Uh-huh.
And I got a phone call one day, and it was Herbie Hancock.
Mm.
And he was saying, hey, Buster, he says, we're going into the Both And. There was a club called the Both And in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And we open tomorrow, and Miles wants you to come and join the band.
Oh, wow.
So, so I said, hold on a minute. So I hold the phone. I looked at my wife and I said, baby, Miles Davis, Miles. you know, so so I got to be cool.
Right.
I said, yeah, Herbie, I'd love to, but Ray Brown was a big teacher to me. Ray Brown taught me a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what he stressed to me, he says, always know what you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And he said also get stuff in writing. You know? He said, protect yourself all the time. So I asked Herbie, I said, so Herbie, what's the gig pay? So Herbie said, well, I think Miles will pay you $300 a week. And I told Herbie, I said, Herbie, I don't tie my tie for less than $350. So Herbie said, oh, well, okay, well, I'll have to ask Miles. So I'll call you back. So I hung up the phone and I said, damn, I sure hope I didn't blow this. But within the hour, Herbie called me back and says, okay, Miles said he'll pay you $350. I said, great, So the next day, me and my wife, we got on an airplane and we went up to San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, Herbie and the band were staying at a house on Grove Street,
Mm-hmm.
and I was supposed to go to this house and have a quick rehearsal. So me and my wife and my bass. We go to this house and knock on the door, and Herbie answers the door, and there's a piano right at the entranceway as you come into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I take my bass out there right at the piano, and Wayne comes in, and Tony comes in, and I meet them, and Herbie sits down at the piano, and he says, "Okay, we're gonna play So What?" You know, and so I mean, I know every note of Miles's repertoire. So, and who didn't know So What?
Right.
I play the bass line, which is the melody. You know, bed up, bed up. We got that far, and Herbie said, "Oh man, you fine. It's fine." And I put my cover back on the bass and went to the hotel.
Hmm.
Then went to the club, and Miles had just recorded the album ESP.
Yeah. ESP. Yep.
And the first tune, we when we get on the bandstand, the first tune is Agitation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's all of anything that resembles any kind of statement,
Right.
as a melody. And now we're off to the races, and nobody told me nothing, you know, and that was it. And we played, Nancy happened to was taking a 5-week recess,
Mm-hmm.
and Miles had a tour for 5 weeks.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I played that 5 weeks with Miles, and Nancy was also had me on retainer.
Okay.
So I was still getting paid by Nancy while I'm working with
Wow.
Miles.
That's real good, man. Wow. That's
Yeah.
real good.
Miles asked me to stay with the band, but and I said, Miles, I said, why now? Why couldn't you have done this earlier? You know, I
Right.
got a yellow Stingray Corvette. I'm living in San Fernando Valley. I'm making, I got a year's itinerary at the beginning of every year with Nancy.
Right.
She's paying me good, and she's paying me every week. You know,
That
I
was a good
couldn't,
gig.
I couldn't miss that.
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
when you come back, Miles, I'll be here waiting for you. I'll be ready for you. Uh,
Wow. That's great, man.
yeah, but we did go into the studio, and we recorded one tune. We recorded Wayne Tuner's "Water Babies."
Water Babies. Yeah. I remember that. Water
Hmm.
Babies. That's right. That's incredible.
Hmm.
So, Buster, tell me about Herbie Hancock Mwandishi Band. That music was just so far out, it blew my mind. I love that. And even Eddie Henderson talks about how bad that band was, man. He would love, saw an interview with him. He says, I would love to just get back to playing that music. But tell us about that whole concept, how you got in that band and what you guys were doing.
Well, I was working at the Copacabana
Okay.
with Nancy. I had just come back to New York. And of course, I waited until I had a gig that brought me back to New York
Mm-hmm.
with Nancy. We were working at the Copa. So my wife and I decided, well, that's a good time for us to, hire the Mayfair truck, a Mayfair van, and move all our stuff back to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. And Mickey Roker was in the band then, the trio. We always had a big band when we worked with Nancy, but she always carried her trio.
Right.
And so I knew Ron Carter, and Ron Carter and I were friends.
Mm-hmm.
And Herbie was starting a new band, and he had a gig at the Vanguard the same week that we're working at the Copa.
Mm-hmm.
And but Ron was getting busy, doing some Broadway plays, and so he was doing this play, and he couldn't get to the Vanguard in time for the first set.
Okay.
First set started at 9:30, and so he asked me to play his first set for him.
Wow.
So I would play my gig with Nancy. I think we started something like 7 o'clock or 7:30 or something like that. But anyway, it allowed me to play the first set with Nancy and then run downtown to the Village Vanguard
Mm-hmm.
and play Herbie's first set. Fortunately, Mickey Roca went with me because this is opening night, and Pete LaRocca is Herbie's drummer.
Yep, Pete LaRocca. Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to start at 9:30, and I need them to start at 9:30 so that I can play that hour and get back to the Copa,
Mm-hmm.
play Nancy's second show.
Right.
So, uh, but Pete LaRocca doesn't show up. So, but Mickey Roca is there, and Herbie knew Mickey Roca. Herbie Roca had just recorded "Speak Like a Child"
Look
with
like a
Herbie,
child. Right.
and and he played his ass off on that record.
Yeah, that's a great record.
So we go on the bandstand and we play um, the first set and get on back up to 54th Street, I think it was, or something, and to play the Copa.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did this every night, and it turned out that um, every night, Mickey would go with me, and because Pete LaRocca wouldn't show.
Okay.
Pete LaRocca, uh, during the week, Herbie asked Pete, says, "Man, we hit at 9:30. How come you don't come on time?" And Pete told Herbie, he says, "Man, I don't feel like playing till 10:30." But anyway, when the gig was finished, and the band was Garnett Brown on trombone,
Mm-hmm.
Joe Henderson on
Yep.
tenor,
Mm-hmm.
and Johnny Coles on trumpet. And so when the Vanguard finished, and this was my last gig with Nancy, so I had a conversation with Herbie, and Ron is still kind of busy. So, um, you know, Herbie, says, "Look, man, can you stay? Can you stay with the band?" I said, "Yeah." I said, plus, you know, this is you. You need me. You need me in this band. You know. And so we stayed together for 5 years.
Man, that was some great stuff you guys were doing. I loved all of it. Just
Yeah.
groundbreaking music, way ahead of its time. And it just seems like after Miles came out with Bitches Brew, music just in general changed and just started going in that direction. Then you have the fusion and the rock bands and everything that followed that, whether it was Tony Williams' Lifetime, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, Return to Forever. Everything just changed after that. The 60s ushering into the 70s. But over the years, Buster, like I said, you've played with everyone under the sun. Some great stuff. I've called you several times, and I really enjoyed years later that band that you guys had called Four Generation of Miles with Mike Stern, the late Sonny Fortune,
And Jimmy
and
Crowe.
Jim Mandy. We just lost Jimmy, yeah, and I just caught him in January, and yeah, he played his butt off, man. But you know, the funny thing is, I saw you late last year. I'm at Keystone Corner, and I said, Buster seems to love to come Baltimore. I'm always seeing him around this area. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, you just come walking in, and you sat at the bar where Roy Haynes was playing. And I said, man, Buster just seems to always be around in this area. But yeah, that was a great show. But also, man, I wanted to talk to you about that fantastic documentary on you, Bass to Infinity, that came out a couple of years ago. I thought it was fantastic, great stuff. Uh, what made you finally decide to do a documentary all these years later?
Well, um, this filmmaker, Adam Kahn,
Yeah.
um, I think I was working at Smoke, and I didn't know him, but he came and introduced himself to me
Hmm.
and uh, told me that he was a filmmaker and that he would like to do. He wanted to do a documentary. He wanted to do a film on bass players, and would I want to be a part of it? And he told me that he had done this film on Rasan Roland Kirk, it was the three angled triangle or something like that. I forget what it was.
Hmm.
And I had never seen that. Um, and also he was working on a documentary of a Junior Mance.
Hmm.
And uh, so I told him, I said, well, tell me more about this project that you want to do. He said, well, I want to, uh, feature a few different bass players in this and talk to you guys, and get your perspectives on different things. And
Hmm.
so I listened to it and I said, well, uh, I'm not interested in being part of a documentary of uh, different bass players. I said, but if you want to do a documentary on me, then I'd consider that.
Right.
So he said, well, yeah. So then we started.
That was great, man.
It
Yeah,
took about,
Christian.
2 years to do it. And I tell you, I I I'm very pleased with the way it came out.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
It is very good, and uh, yeah, I'm very pleased with it because I there were certain things I didn't want it to be,
Hmm.
and I think you know um, it's I like it. I
Yeah.
like it, and it gets. I remember it opened at a theater um, downtown on Third Street and Sixth Avenue,
Mm.
uh, right perpendicular to the Blue Note.
Hmm.
And I was very, and of course I had to be at the opening. And uh, I don't like uh, anything that 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 reeks or hints of pretense.
I got you. I understand. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I would have been very happy to not be at this opening at all.
Hmm.
Well, y'all tell me how you send me some text and tell me how you like it.
Right.
But
Right.
no, I had to be there. And so I get there along with my wife, before anybody.
Hmm.
And my sisters, I have four sisters, and some of them came up from Camden, and uh, my sister, they walk in, one of my sisters says, Buster, there's a line outside you know, around the corner, like double and, threefold around the corner. And it was the coldest day of the year. I think it was in November.
Hmm.
And she says, you got to go out and say hello to these people. So I said, well, okay. So, and I went outside and I was so impressed. I went from the first person in line. I shook hands and spoke with everyone
Wow.
in that line all the way around the corner and down the block.
Mm.
And and everyone, I mean, they're standing out in the cold, and everyone was so, appreciative that they didn't expect that. I
Yeah.
didn't expect them. They didn't expect. I didn't expect what they were doing. They didn't expect what I was doing. But I
Mm.
was so appreciative of them, and they showed their appreciation of me. And anyway, uh, the theater was packed, and the film. I mean, it had laughter in all of the right places, and it was just amazing. And then it's been scheduled to show at a lot of different places,
Yeah.
and it did get a few showings before this pandemic, but once
Hmm.
it everything's been canceled.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also it was set for some viewings in Italy. It was set for some viewings in England,
Hmm.
and so the filmmaker is now working on uh, the money that he needs to satisfy all of the licensing requirements, and he's I think he's trying to get it on Netflix,
Yeah.
and but it's going to be it's going to be widely shown, I'm sure.
People love it. I mean, you were in the Maryland area, Bethesda, for the Mid Atlantic Jazz Festival in
Yeah, they
February.
showed it there.
I was
Yeah,
there. I was there. They showed it there too, and I was talking to Rufus Reed. Saw the duet that you did with him. Rufus is a great guy,
yeah.
and just the film. I mean, everybody was in it. You had Carmen Lundy, of course, Lenny, Christian McBride. I'm like, this is fantastic, and I was laughing when I was watching. I says, man, I just saw all of these people recently, but I thought it was very well done. I said, this is excellent. And you and I had talked about it, I think, a couple of years ago at Blues Alley when you were there with Stefan Harris. And this, you
Wow.
were telling me, he said, Preston, yeah, it's probably going to be coming out, I think, the following year. But it was great, man. I thought it was just fantastic. Just wanted to ask you, in your spare time, when you're home, what type of music or who are you listening to right now? Are there any artists out there that you're listening to and say, man, this guy's got a lot of talent, or maybe some younger bass players? I mean, of course, Christian, he's been around for a while, but maybe some young and upcoming bass players or musicians that you're hearing and you're impressed by them.
Well, I'm a professor at Manhattan School of Music
Okay.
and also at the New School. And so I have at least three ensemble classes
Hmm.
that I do weekly between the two schools.
Right.
And I have an array of bass students. Um, uh, I think this past semester between the two schools, I had about 15 bass students.
Hmm.
So I'm hearing up and coming talent all the time.
All the time. Okay.
And I have to be inspirational for this up and coming talent,
Hmm.
because there's no way that I that I can merit a position in their life without being an addition to the fulfillment of their dream.
Hmm.
So uh, so I don't have to step out of my way to listen to new talent.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Buster, listen, I want to thank you so much for this interview. And hold on, don't hang up. But I just wanted to thank you for this interview. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for offering your time. And it's always a pleasure to see you perform, man. I hope once this is over, you get back to Blues Alley because I always catch you there. But
You know, we're scheduled. We're supposed to be
I
going
know,
in
I,
June
I
to play.
know. I know. But listen, man, thanks again. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.
All right. Thank you.